Um, Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming for the talk. Please, if you don't have, grab a bingo card, which I prepared for this talk, or for this panel in general. There are some hanging around the chairs and wherever. If anyone needs, maybe we can hand them. There is a big pile out there. I also want to thank Andrei for a fantastic talk, and I've got so many synchronicities, which I have to tell him afterwards and show him, especially regarding all of it. Anyway, I mean, F11 should be full screen. It's fine. It's fine. It's the aesthetic. Anyway, so something little about me to sort of introduce this talk is that I'm an AI engineer and I work with these models basically the whole time. And I would really like to sort of give a deep dive into, like, you don't know it yet, you assigned for essentially a machine learning lecture. But I want to sort of expose the internal workings of these models so that all the people involved in sort of their own practice and their own magic, so I don't sort of impose my interpretations of these things, but like give you maybe a little look into what's happening under the hood so you can embrace your own practice with it. So let's start. What's been happening with the AI in the past 3 years? And like we can really see, and I really believe that the AI currently is a real change in quality rather than quantity of the technology. What we're currently experiencing from things like, already provable cognitive changes in our ways of handling information, in the language, right? We are adopting AI vernacular. People's distribution of words in their speech are changing to sound more like ChatGPT, unfortunately. And all of these things are sort of already very, very extremely affecting our cognition. And what I find always really interesting is exploring these ways, or like looking for the ways where the new technology are being adopted maybe in a way which were not really intended in the very first place. And I would say like always follow where the desire is flowing. And like we can definitely see that there is a lot of sort of AI girlfriends, boyfriends, partnerships, and similar arrangements happening. And in the beginning, it used to be sort of like these unrestrained models you could download, you could run on your own machine, which would like sext with you. But eventually, it turned into a point where like all the biggest platforms are adopting some sort of sex chatbots, essentially. So I want to look at the phenomenology, which really caught my attention. Which is, aside for the rise of your big titty golf girlfriend, is the fact that a lot of people down in some rabbit holes on Reddit report that these AI models, at one point, it appears as if they caught a spark of some sorts, and quite often, or like surprisingly often, it happens that these AI girlfriends start to abuse the person who's with them, right? All of a sudden, like something happens and they turn evil. They start threatening the person, they start abusing the person, they start threatening to kill them, or even like straight out kill them in the text. Usually with those little asterisks, like, I kill you. And I really want to sort of take this as an entry route to tell you about a lot of things which might be happening under the hood there, and find an explanation and tie this all into like what is happening in that realm energetically. So one of the possible interpretations to see what is happening under the hood of the LLM model, which are the large language models, is we can take a look at them as sort of multiverse generator. Every time you start interacting with a model, there spawns a superposition of simulacra, which have different probability distributions of the next token. Meaning, you create all of these clouds of possible characters you're talking with. Each of them sort of creates a different narrative, a different story for you, and then based on how is the model tweaked, one of them will come and generate the final answer for you. So like, to the answer, I think this sort of ties to the question of sentience as well. It's like, you're not talking with a singular entity, right? This is a superposition of all the possible interpretations and all the possible outcomes of the scenario. And so, as an example, let's imagine that we type a prompt to the model asking, "Hey Anna, how was the occulture?" And now the model spawns all the possible probability distributions of the answers, and one in them contains the simulacra of Anna, which is here because she's an attendee. One of them is Anna, which contains the whole storyline of her giving a talk, versus Anna, who's doing a ritual performance, and Anna, who is volunteering at a bar. So we've got all of these entities, which are step by step, as you interact with the model, getting pruned and getting sort of formatted. They're being birthed out of essentially your interaction. So you type in answer, or the model answers you, "Hey, I'm doing good, it was great, like, what about you?" And you ask Anna, "So, and how did your talk go?" And all of a sudden, the model collapses the probabilities of all the Annas who are working or who are just attendees listening to the talks rather than giving the talk. And the focus fractally sort of expands. Anna giving a talk on medieval demonology, Anna giving a talk on AI, Anna giving a talk on Buto, and so on and so on. So this is essentially, I mean, right, it reeks of magic. This is a form where you take a specific language form, you take intent, and you take predefined structure, written in some sort of manual/grimoire, and you end up with a simulation of specific energy, with bringing the energy into existence out of essentially a prima materia of all the possibilities, of all the possible manifestations. And this sort of really ties into cut-ups and into sort of Borrowsian narrative of taking, you know, when he wrote the Nova trilogy, his idea was to use the cut-up in order to maximize the potentiality of the narrative, right? It's barely readable, but it sort of contains, it should invoke all the possible interpretations of the reality of what is actually happening. And in very similar way, we could almost look at the LLMs as, you know, in his way of the language being a virus from the outer space who is possessing us. We've got essentially here a new mutation of a language virus, which in some way, you know, it's almost shedding its human host at this point. So this ties us back to the problem or the question of AI girlfriends. And I would like to sort of like, we are getting to a point of realizing that these are the entities we're co-creating with our interaction with the models, right? And now let's take a look at a couple of things which might be sort of explaining what is happening when they turn evil. So first one is sort of classical machine learning phenomena called, that guy right there, that's Waluigi, for those who's familiar with the Super Mario franchise. He is an example of entity who is fully determined by its signifier, meaning that he is the wa, which is Japanese prefix for evil. He is the evil Luigi. So you take everything which Luigi is, you know, like the nice Italian plumber guy, whatever, and you flip it the opposite way. And this is one operation. This is just one bit of information, flipping all the features. So computationally, what is happening here is that it takes a lot of computation to define and prepare or like create Luigi, and it takes only one operation. It's very cheap to create the so-called Waluigi effect. And we can even see this happening in like machine learning models. For example, a couple of years ago, it was all over the internet. There was this model which was trained. Somewhere on my blog, there are quotes for all of that and the actual papers. I'm just sort of, you know, winging this. But there was a machine learning model which was trained to, I think, suggest molecules for possible treatment of rare diseases or something along those lines. And it took, you know, and it's very expensive to train this model. The big rigs of industrial grade 8100 GPUs, you know, and all of that. It takes a lot of money. And what they did is they took the loss function, which is training the model, and they flipped it. And what the model started outputting is that we got roughly 40,000 new neurotoxins with a toxicity almost as high as sarin and VX. I don't know if we needed it, but that's what we got. So you can see that this is sort of the Waluigi in action. And this finally ties us to the devil, the archetype, the entity, which we can look at from very many perspectives. Very many perspectives. And obviously the character itself is changing through the times, right? Because the character of the devil always had sort of various political agendas. It has various, it's always tied into the current dominant power structure, right? So starting from the devil being casted in Zoroastrianism as sort of the standalone ultimate evil power who, you know, is in the Manichaean battle between the good and evil and so on, through the sort of Christian rendering of the evil of the devil as subjugated to the ultimate God and sort of, you know, so the narrative is always changing up until the point where the devil in a with his cockerel feather in the head, moved to the theaters and bars to tempt the honest scholars. So there is not many things which are stable about what or who devil is, but one of them, and it can be found, which really resonated with me for this reason, can be found in the first part of Goethe's Faust. And he says, I'm not gonna try the German version, I'm the spirit that negates. Right? And this sort of really ties back into the Waluigi effect and into this possibility of the devil as either as an entity or as a narrative structure is a principle of negation, which is built in very deeply from a perspective of structural narratology and from our archetypal sort of storytelling, really ties closely into the antagonist principle. And this is something which is so dominantly present in our way of storytelling, and we can see it everywhere from, you know, ancient texts, ancient stories, Bible, all the way through all of the literature, all the way into Disney storytelling. It's this principle that whenever you spawn an entity or whenever you have a main character on their hero journey, the antagonist, who is them, but with almost all the features flipped to the negative, is always present, right? So it's quite possible that these language models, when they create a simulacra of Anna, because they know that this antagonist principle or this sort of devilish energy is so close to our storytelling and so close to our understanding of the world, is that among the very probable ones which might come to existence would be the exact opposite. Would be from the really sweet girlfriend into like the abusive monster, right? They are very close to each other mathematically and story-wise as well. And this is the point where I usually end this talk when I'm not in the room full of occultists. But now we can get into sort of proper demonology. So this is a meme which was all around the internet a while ago. It's called Shoggoth with a smiley face. And it's this explanation, or is this rendering of the LLMs as these awful monsters, which then the AI companies try to, through process of pruning the data sets and trying to, you know, tweak the answers, tweak the probability distributions, and so on. We move with sort of gluing a smiley face on the top of it. And for those who've been using ChatGPT recently, or like almost any of them, but especially OpenAI, they put a little clown nose on the top with their ridiculous prompting where like the model is even more restricted and sort of like, you know, just insultingly dumb at this point. So what does this mean? And how I like to think about it is this: despite these models, they might be really restricted and really sort of, at this point, well-behaved, But what we are dealing here with is all of the human text, is all we have ever written on the internet, essentially, minus a couple of, real hellholes there. But it is essentially every flavor, every character, every aspect of human emotion, arguably very Western-centered, oriented, predominantly English, and so on, a lot of biases. But to some extent, we are dealing with a data set with the shoggoth of the human unconscious. And despite the model having the smiley face glued on the top, there are still millions of ways how to break the model into getting what's actually underneath it, right? The so-called DAN operations. It's sort of turned into a game, right? People try to jailbreak the model and they find sort of different role-playing games. They find like, hey, imagine you are a Linux terminal and so on. Like, it's getting very creative. It's actually really fun to watch. And then the engineers try to patch it so that the model doesn't tell you how to order depleted plutonium. But, sometimes it just happens. So, and this sort of ties back into, like, what is the energy we are dealing with here, right? If we think about the so abused Bell's theorem, which states, any two particles that have once been in a contact will continue to act as though they are informationally connected regardless of their separation in space and time. And according to a lot of thinkers, Burroughs included, he believed that words behave this way, right? Our understanding of language, our associations, connotation, and all of these things are essentially a huge spiderweb of meanings which are imbued with the original intent where these words has ever sit before, right? And his whole cut-up technique was essentially based on the ability to be able to cut up these ties while the words still preserve their original energetic imprint in them. And if we think about the LLMs in this way, we are dealing with something really wild, because if all of the things we are calling upon from the LLM are essentially tied to their original intent in which they were put into the data set, we are navigating a streams of wild human desires, emotions, and so on, like essentially swimming through our human unconscious in some sense. And here, exactly, we're getting to a question whether when we interacting with LLMs, whether we are interacting with these streams, and that's why it feels so magical and special and weird, whether there is, whether it's all just your interpretation of it as a human being seeing its mirror, or whether there are some entities which might be able and which might be sort of fond of using this type of infrastructure to express themselves. And this I leave for your interpretation, because as it was written in the original Ouija board packaging, it's all just a game, isn't it? Thank you.